Hello everyone, I'm back and today we are going to be looking at anamorphic lens flares because there are a few tutorials on how to do on YouTube, but I feel like there aren't any brilliant ones. So I'm going to try and show off the techniques I use to make lens flares and see what people think of it. Okay, so I want to choose a particular location I want to save out to, just like the start of every video so far, where I've done these special effects. This is the second one. So, yeah. Frame rate doesn't really matter, though I do like to set it the same as my video. And the resolution should be the same as your video as well. Okay. I'm also going to set the end frame to be the same as my video, which I know is 650. But if you want to find out, just go down to video editing, bring your movie in, and it'll tell you exactly what frame that is. Now, we are going to be doing some work in the node editor, in the movie clip editor, and we are going to be doing some video editing at the end. But first though, the movie clip editor, I'm going to add in the video that I'm going to be tracking, and I'm going to start tracking at frame 175. Now if you don't know what tracking is, it's very simple. You press Control and click to add a tracker in a location you want, and what you can do is track a particular part of your video, and that point on your video will be tracked through so that this tracker follows it throughout the entire video. In my case, it'll be my eye that I'll be tracking, both of my eyes in fact, and I want this tracker to follow my eyes throughout the entire video, or at least the part that I'm going to be having glowing eyes. So, you may have some problems where it doesn't always track in one go. That might be due to lack of resolution, or for me in my case, it is lack of resolution, but also because I close my eyes, I blink a couple of times. Hold down Control T to start tracking, and from here you just need to do a bit of manual moving around. You can go through each frame using the arrow keys and move it manually if you want, and if you hold down Shift while moving an object, you can move it slower so you can get to a finer point. Once this is finished, I'll come back to you. Okay, so now I've tracked my video. If I go back over it, you can see that it tracked properly. There was a bit of manual work in it, but that's usually the case anyway when you're using trackers. Blender is not the best for tracking. It's not that bad, but it's not brilliant either. Anyway, now that we've done that, I'm going to make sure the first track is selected. I'm going to go back to 3D view, delete the cube because we don't need it. We don't need the light either. Going to go to front view, press Control Alt, number pad 0 to move the camera to the view I am currently in. And the reason I want to do that, I'll show you now. Having the first track selected, I'm going to go to Reconstruction, Link Empty to Track. I'm going to do the same thing with the other tracker. Now if I show you, we now have two empties here. These will follow along with the video. To show you, I'm going to turn on background images, bring in that video, and it follows the video for the amount of frames needed. Okay, so now what we want to do is select the first tracker, the first empty, sorry. Press Shift S, and I want to say cursor to selected. Then I'm going to press Shift A and add an Ecosphere. Subdivisions should be 3. It adds more resolution. It just helps. Scale it down to the size you want, and you actually want this to be a bit bigger than the actual eyeball. Well, not the eyeball, but the visible part of the eye. Okay, I'm going to add a material to it now. That material is going to have an emission of 5, and apart from that, it's fine. Then I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate them. Duplicate it. Then I'm going to select the second empty. Press Shift S. Shift S. And cursor to selected. Select the Ecosphere again. Shift S. Selection to cursor. Then, having the Ecosphere selected, I'm going to select the empty and press Control P to parent it. Do the same thing with the second Ecosphere. So now if I move around the empty, it doesn't move. Okay, that's because it's linked to the track. As you can see, it follows the empty around. It stays with it, which is what we want. Okay. Now that that's done, we can move on to the next part. That part being, we are going to change the name of this to large, because we are going to have 2 of these scenes. I'm going to create a full copy of this scene, and I'm going to call it small. Select the first Ecosphere, scale it down to size 0.4, same with the second one. And the reason I want to do this is because these are going to be a long line that across that's going to create that's going to help sell the anamorphic look, while the big ones are going to be more of the actual light. I'll show you an example here. If you see, the small one is going to create the big line, while the big one is going to create that main light. And that's the idea of it. Okay. Back to Blender. At this point, we are nearly ready to move on. Just want to make sure both scenes have a black background. That's very important. It won't work if it doesn't. And now, in the large scene, I'm going to go to Node Editor. Render tab, use nodes, backdrop, auto render. I'm going to duplicate this render layer and change it to small. I'm going to add a viewer node and bring that in. You can connect it to whichever one you want. It doesn't matter yet. We need to render both of these, so I'm going to press F12 and that renders the large. I'm going to go to the small, render that as well. Then we can go back to large, and everything's fine. Another way of doing this is by clicking this little button here. Okay. We are going to be using 4 different nodes, mostly. We are going to be using the glare node, which is actually going to create our effect. We are going to be using the mix node, which will be very useful to layer things on top of each other. We are going to be using the color balance node, which gives the entire effect some color. And we finish off with the blur node, which just helps it look more realistic. So let's add the glare node, which is in filter. Damn. Glare. There we go. I'm going to bring that into the large render first. And this is the effect it creates. Now, I don't know about you, but most times that I see anamorphic lens flares, they only have 2 streaks. So under streaks, bring that down to 2. However, if you want, you can bring it like the way up to 16. Creates a nice looking effect as well. You can use that if you want, but for what we're doing, I'm only going to use 2. Okay. I'm going to leave that for the moment. I'll come back to it. I'm going to duplicate this. Do the same thing with the small render. And it creates this effect. And once again, I'm going to come back to that as well. But plugging this back in to the viewer node so we can see what we're doing, I am now going to add in the color balance node, which is under color. And we can start messing with the color. Now, as you can see, there are 3 different color wheels. One is for the back part, yeah, that's pretty much the best way to explain it. It's the back, yeah. This is the middle part. I would change that to red. Yeah, and then this is the front, the main part. The gamma is kind of the really weird one. You don't really know what to do with it as much as all the other ones. But I want these all to be a bluish color. Turning up the mix blends it in a bit better. Though you may not want that. Depends. Well, that's way too strong anyway. There's a bit of messing around involved in it. But you can sort that out for yourself. Let me go through everything really quickly. The offset, the angle offset, does what you expect. I'm going to keep that 0 though, because they're usually straight across. They're not. They don't bend. They're not like at that angle. It's very rare you see something like that. Maybe in, I don't know, Man of Steel or something. Okay, the fade just makes it bigger up to a certain extent. Changing it to high quality makes it smaller. However, if you set up the iterations, it makes it go out a bit further. However, we want this to be low enough because that's not actually going to have that effect. We're going to leave that all up to this render layer. Might still be a bit strong. Okay, now I'm going to add in the third important node, which is blur, and there are all these variables we don't need to deal with. I'm going to change this to fast Gaussian. Just makes it easier. Now, the y-axis, we don't want this to be nearly as high as the x-axis. We want it to be high enough that makes it a cool effect, but not too high. Just compositing. And that creates a nice effect for the moment. Let's just deal with this now. I'm going to duplicate the color bands. And connect that up. And I'm also going to duplicate the blur. Only that doesn't need to be nearly as strong. So I'm going to set that back down to 0 for the moment. Just connect that up to see exactly what's going on. Okay. Then I'm going to bring the fade out a lot further. Turn up the iterations. Let's see how far this can stretch out. It can stretch out pretty far. Just set that to medium and it can stretch out the full way. That's the quality, by the way. I'll just tell you what everything else does. Ghosts create that kind of optical fit, if I can speak, optical flare that you get when you look into the sun. I already have a video on it right here. The simple star is not useful at all. It creates this weird effect. I don't understand why someone would want to use it, and I don't know what they would use it for. So, I know, suit yourself, but it's not my cup of tea. And the glare, the fog glow, we are going to be using afterwards. If I show you this a bit better, it just creates a glow around it. Anyway, back to streaks. Okay. So, I'm going to turn the fade down just a little bit because it's still kind of unrealistic to have that strong the entire way through. And we can now connect both these up since they're working pretty well. I'm going to press Shift A and add the final node that I mentioned, that being the mix node. Only we're not going to set it to mix because it won't work. We are going to set it to add. And there we go. That's the main part of the effect. I'm going to bring that out a bit so it stretches a bit further. And turn the y-axis only up a couple of pixels, so that just creates a smoother transition into the black. And that's looking pretty nice, actually. You can mess with it a bit more. There's still loads you can do with it. But now we're going to add in the final part of the glare. I'm going to copy all these again and change that to fog glow, as I mentioned before, because I said I would, and now I'm doing it. We're going to connect the big render layer into it, the large one, since that's the one that actually creates the main light source. The other one just is mostly the flare. And we're going to duplicate the mix node, not the viewer node, and connect that up. Okay, I'm going to set the X to 50 and the Y to 50. That's going to create a big thing. In fact, I might even bring it out a bit more on the X. There we go, that's nice. Okay. So you can mess with it as much as you want after this. Get the right color that you want. And once that's done, we can bring this back over here and bring in our video. I'm going to press Shift A. I'm going to add the image input node and bring in our video. Frames, for me that's 650. For you that's whatever it is. I have no idea. But there we go. And we can add in one more. Oh my god. One more add node, the mix node, and connect that up. Magic. Right there. Okay. So mess around with that as much as you want. But there are two last things I really want to do. The first one being adding the hue saturation value node to the small lens flare layer, render layer, and bring the value down to something a lot lower. And this just tends to create a nicer effect, not that low. Just a bit lower. There we go. Yeah. There, that's good. Okay. From there you can add whatever you want. You can duplicate this entire thing if I show you now. You can duplicate it and set the offset angle to be something you want. And when you connect that in at the top, it'll create a cool effect. Creates a nice looking streak. So you can be pretty imaginative with this effect, and it really creates a nice looking lens flare. Blender is not completely useless for those who think it is. In terms of VFX, you can do many different things with it, and that's what I'm trying to show with all my new tutorials. Okay, so now that this is done, I'm going to duplicate the mix node one more time, change it back to mix, and bring the video in here. And to show you exactly what it does, it turns it off. Because I don't want the effects to be present the entire time, it just looks stupid. And also it didn't track the entire video, so it won't work anyway. I don't want it to start at frame 175, even though I did start tracking at that frame. It just helps to add a few extra frames. I know exactly where I want to start. That's at frame 230. So at that frame, I'm going to set that to 0. And with the cursor on top, I'm going to add a keyframe by pressing I. Just one thing I'd like to do, bring that fade down a little bit. Not that much. There we go. Okay. Then I'm going to go back 3 or 4 frames, and I'm just going to set this back up to 1 and press I. So that creates a smooth transition, in these small amounts of frames, because it's suddenly appearing just like that. It doesn't look completely real. Well, it doesn't look completely real anyway, because your eyes can't light up, but still. And I know the frame that I want this effect to disappear again is frame 350. And to do that, I'm just going to go to that frame and press I. Well, change it to 1 and then press I. And once again go back a couple of frames. I'm going to go back 5 frames, set that to 0 and press I. What you could do, and what might make it more realistic for you, is actually change it using the hue saturation value. Put that at the start and make the value 0. Put that at the start here, make the value 0, and then change it to 1 when you want to, because all this stuff will only be added on top of that. But for my purpose, it's fine. It doesn't matter. It doesn't make any difference. Okay, now that we have that done, I'd say we're pretty much ready to go. Just one important thing: make sure the final node is hooked up to the composite so that it renders properly. Check it out. There we go. Very nice looking anamorphic lens flare effect. I'm going to render this video out, save it as a video, and I'll show you the video again at the end. Okay, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I'm not going to be uploading any new tutorials until after my holidays. The next tutorial to come out will be muzzle flashes, so please subscribe to make sure you catch it as soon as it comes out. Please post any comments or any requests in the comment section. Please like this video. You know all this stuff. Okay, thanks for watching. Bye.